Hi, I'm Reuven Carlyle, State Representative from Seattle, and I also serve as chair of the Finance Committee in the Washington State House of Representatives. That means I'm in charge of tax policy, and I thought it would be super productive and useful to have a genuine conversation about taxes in Washington State. It's incredibly important to remember that the general concept of a good tax system is that there are 5 central principles. Those principles are adequacy, economic vitality, does it work with our economy, fairness, stability, and transparency. Those concepts are central to any good state, and it's very painful to acknowledge that today Washington State fails in every single one of those categories. We are on the march toward being a low tax, low service, low quality of life state. It's time to acknowledge the profound implications of our revenue structure. Every year for the past 10 years, we have had a structural deficit. As the Washington State Legislature comes into session and we negotiate with the governor, we try to design our revenue system, our tax system, as well as our spending system to acknowledge the needs of public education and healthcare, transportation, and so many other areas. That structural deficit has now reached substantial proportions. Every single year when we run a structural deficit, it's not just because of spending, it's because of our tax system. It is time for us to acknowledge that we have the ability to reset our system, to build a modern 21st century structure that was not designed by haphazard instruction in the 1930s the way our current system was. So first of all, most people won't believe this, but it is actually true that we are 35th in the nation in the combined level of all state and local taxes. Every single penny of taxes you can think about in your city, your county, your state, the port, liquor, transportation, all of those taxes combined mean that we are 35th in the nation in the combined level of taxes based upon personal income, which is the primary metric that is used by economists on both the left and the right. It is important to remember that we are lower as a tax burden than all but 2 states that we directly compete with. Those states we call the global challenge states that have strong higher education systems, higher education technology, agriculture, trade, those states that we feel are important competitors in a healthy way. We are also lower than all but a few of the poorest states in the nation. That means that our tax burden based on personal income is lower than some of the lowest income states in the entire country. Keep in mind that this did not happen quickly, that did not happen by accident. It happened over the course of 20 years. 20 years ago, Washington State was 11th in the nation in the combined level of all state and local taxes. We were admittedly a high tax state. Today, we are 35th in the nation. In 19 years, we went from 11th to 35th in the nation in the tax burden on the people of Washington. How in the world did that happen? How did we get here? I'll tell you 3 big reasons. The Washington State Legislature, fortunately or unfortunately, depending upon what your views are, has effectively carved out much of our state's primary business tax. It's called the Business and Occupation Tax. We collect about $3.1 billion every year in B&O taxes. Of that dollar, most of those dollars are paid by retail, by small retail establishment, by restaurants. Major industries have effectively been carved out from meaningful contributions to that business and occupation tax. Examples include the aerospace industry, the high technology industry, the agriculture, the timber industry. A specific example is the entire agriculture industry and timber industry pays about $14 million of the $3.1 billion. The technology industry, about $28 million of the $3.1 billion. And the aerospace industry, about $71 million of the $3.1 billion. So it shows you that we have shifted a lot of those costs onto other businesses. The second major reason is that the voters, as is their right, as the supreme law of the land, of course, have passed initiatives that have effectively reduced the property tax to a smaller and smaller percentage of our revenues. And now those revenues have been reduced substantially through that 1% cap on growth. The third major reason that we've gone from 11th to 35th in the nation in the tax burden of Washington State is that our sales tax has been effectively carved out by our economy. What does that mean? It means when you buy something at the store, if you buy a pencil or if you buy a piece of paper, you pay sales tax. But if you buy a service, like an architecture service, a legal service or other types of service, which is much of our economy, you don't pay sales tax. And of course, if you buy things online, sometimes you pay sales tax and sometimes you don't. But it's had the effect of contributing to our substantial reduction in our overall tax burden. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with acknowledging that our state's reliance on a very high sales tax, on a gross receipts business tax, and on the state portion of the property tax has had the effect of being an outlier. We're very, very unusual. Most states, as you know, have an income tax. And because we don't have an income tax as a state, we have to make up for that, and that means being effectively unfair system for sales tax, unfair for business tax, and unfair in terms of property tax. We have a consumption-based system, and it's heavily reliant upon consumer behavior. That's one of the reasons that we, at the end of the day, have lowered our ability to have a stable system. We have a very, very volatile tax structure. And that means that when the economy is good and people are purchasing refrigerators and cars and houses, they pay sales tax, and we're able to fund public services like education and healthcare. But when times are bad, and we don't have the consumer behavior, what happens is that we have a dramatic reduction in state spending. So the costs of our system are substantial. The cost of the reduction in our tax base is substantial, most of all on our kids. Keep in mind that half the entire budget goes for public education. So this system disproportionately hurts business. If you're a small business and you're trying to do your best to start that company, you pay that disproportionate impact, and it has an effect. The other thing that we have done is we've created so many tax breaks, 650 tax breaks, all across the spectrum for industries, for sectors. The impact of those tax breaks have been really profound. So I'll give you a specific example. If you take all of the tax breaks that we adopted in the decade of the 1990s, the total lost revenue from that today is $1.5 billion. If you take the total cost of all of the tax breaks that we passed in the decade of the 2000s, over 200 tax breaks then, the cost to our system is another $2 billion. So we've lost revenue from creating these tax breaks, and it's just unfair to small business and to the middle class. And most of all, we have a regressive, unfair, unjust system. The wealthy in our state have a really great deal. The fact is the effective tax rate for the super wealthy in our state is less than 2.8%. What that means is the combined level of all taxes in Washington state for the super wealthy is less than 3%. But if you're super low income, that equivalent tax rate for you is about 17%. It's just not fair. The core idea of a progressive system was designed both by Abraham Lincoln and by Teddy Roosevelt. In our state, we do not have that progressive system. It's simply unfair to the middle class, it's unfair to low income, and it's unfair to small business. And now we find ourselves in a situation where we are under court order by the Washington State Supreme Court to more adequately fund public education for the 1 million school kids in our state. And I think people know that we've also doubled tuition at our colleges and our universities. Those are some of the profound implications that we're facing in our state because of the extensive tax breaks that the legislature has granted and the other changes that we've talked about. So I would like you to remember that when you think about adequacy, when you think about economic vitality and matching our economy of today, when you think about fairness, stability, and transparency, all of those elements of a great tax structure, it's tough for us in Washington state to acknowledge, but we really do miss the mark in every single category. So what does it mean? So many of our important quality of life measurements, the quality of workforce training, the quality of public education, quality of our universities and our colleges across the state, and so many other business metrics and personal metrics that show an indication of our state's quality of life are trending in a dangerous way. They're trending down. And one of the reasons is that we are coasting on fumes as a state from the mid-1990s when we were a high-tax state to the time today when we are not adequately investing in public education and in public infrastructure. 2015 and beyond, there is so much that we can do. Opening the books, transparency, acknowledging that we can get a better, fairer, easier, more economically efficient system if we just hold ourselves accountable. That's both as ourselves as legislators and elected officials and as the public. We need our tax preferences, our tax breaks, our tax loopholes to be better written. We need them to be transparent. We need to have accountability, to open up the books so that we can understand who benefits from a tax break for how much value. We need to increase that disclosure, the awareness of what the purpose of a tax break is, and that's the kind of work that your legislature is embarked on. None of it's perfect, none of it's easy, and none of us pretend to have the answer. But I will say that we are so much more as a state than what we've become. We are 32nd in the nation in high school graduation rate, and we're under court order by the state Supreme Court to improve education. Those are just some of the implications of being 35th in the nation in the combined tax burden of our tax structure. I'm asking you to engage in this conversation, to think about these issues, to reach out. Please participate in this public conversation. Ask your elected officials and leaders to engage with you in better understanding how we can make our state all that we're meant to be. Thank you so much, and have a great day.